A sleek elevator ascended the glass skyscraper high above the busy big city streets below. Inside the elevator, billionaire Gideon Sinclair stood next to his fiancée Genevieve. Gideon was a tall, handsome white American man in his early 30s, with sharp blue eyes and an air of quiet confidence. Dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, he cut an imposing yet elegant figure. Despite his immense wealth, Gideon preferred to keep his personal life discreet and private, away from prying eyes. Genevieve, a beautiful woman in her early 30s with immaculate blonde hair and designer attire, clung to his arm. She chatted about their upcoming wedding, scrolling through venue options on her phone. Gideon smiled politely at her excitement, but his mind was elsewhere. He gazed at the numbers above the elevator doors as they lit up floor by floor, somewhat lost in thought. Ding! The elevator slowed and stopped at the next floor. The doors slid open, and Nyla walked in, cradling a small boy on her hip. Nyla was a black American woman in her late 20s, with warm brown skin and deep ebony curls falling to her shoulders. She wore a simple yet stylish blouse and jeans, but it was her face that caught Gideon's full attention. He would recognize those gentle hazel eyes and that radiant smile anywhere. It was the face of the woman he had once loved with all his heart. Time seemed to freeze for Gideon. His breath caught in his chest as memories flooded back. Nyla. He hadn't seen her in years, not since their painful breakup almost 4 years ago. Yet here she was, standing mere feet away in the confined space of the elevator, and in her arms she held a little boy about 3 years old, a toddler, with soft curly hair and inquisitive eyes the color of Gideon's own blue. Nyla's eyes went wide with shock as she recognized Gideon. She instinctively clutched the child, Micah, a bit closer. For a heartbeat, the two just stared at each other in stunned silence. Gideon felt his heart thud against his ribs. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. 1,000 questions raced through his mind at once. Was this child their little boy? Genevieve cleared her throat, breaking the silence. She noticed Gideon's rigid posture and the intensity with which he was staring at the stranger. Not one to be ignored, she offered a polite smile to Nyla. "Hello," Genevieve said courteously, though her eyes darted curiously between Gideon and this woman. "Hello," Nyla replied softly. She tried to maintain composure, but Gideon could see the tremor in her voice. Her grip on Micah tightened. The little boy looked up at his mother, sensing her unease, and then stared at Gideon and Genevieve with innocent curiosity. Gideon's gaze dropped to the boy. The child peered at him with big eyes, and Gideon felt an odd pang in his chest. The boy had hair a shade lighter than Nyla's, with a loose curl pattern. Hair that could very well have come from Gideon's side of the family. And those eyes, Gideon could swear they were the same blue as his own. A wild, unbelievable thought formed in Gideon's mind. Is he mine? The elevator resumed its ascent, the quiet hum filling the tense silence. Gideon finally found his voice. "Nyla," he said, the single word laden with emotions, surprise, confusion, a hint of joy, and underlying hurt. It felt surreal to say her name again after all this time. Nyla nodded faintly. "Hi, Gideon," she murmured, managing a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her heart was pounding. Of all places, of all times, why did she have to run into him here and now? Genevieve's eyes widened slightly. She looked between Gideon and Nyla. "You two know each other?" she asked, an edge creeping into her tone. Before Gideon could answer, the elevator chimed again. They had reached Genevieve's desired floor. The doors slid open smoothly. "This is us, darling," Genevieve said, tugging Gideon's arm. She had noticed something unspoken pass between him and this woman and was eager to leave the awkward encounter. Gideon hesitated, torn, his feet feeling rooted to the floor. He didn't want this moment to end so abruptly. He hadn't even processed what was happening yet. Nyla was right there, but she looked ready to bolt at the first chance. Sensing his fiancée's gentle pull, Gideon mustered a stiff nod to Nyla. It was good to see you," he said quietly, not knowing what else to say. His eyes flickered to the child once more. Micah had now hidden his face shyly against Nyla's shoulder, confused by the tension. Nyla gave a tight nod. "You too," she replied softly, though her gaze fell to the floor. There was so much she wanted to say, questions and emotions swirling in her chest, but this was neither the time nor place. Her priority was protecting her son. Genevieve guided Gideon out of the elevator. As he stepped into the hallway, Gideon glanced back over his shoulder. The last thing he saw as the doors began to close was Nyla's troubled face and Micah's small hand clutching her shirt. The doors shut and the elevator continued upward, carrying away the woman and child who had just upended Gideon's world in the span of a minute. Gideon stood motionless in the corridor, his mind racing. Next to him, Genevieve was studying him with open concern and a flicker of suspicion. "Gideon?" she asked carefully. "Who was that woman? And why are you shaking?" Only then did Gideon realize his hands were trembling. He clenched them to hide it, trying to gather his composure. "She's someone I used to know," he managed to say, voice strained. Genevieve arched a delicate brow. She had never seen Gideon so affected. He was normally a man of steady nerves, one of the youngest billionaires. In New York, he ran his business empire with confidence and calm. It unnerved her to see him so rattled. "Clearly," Genevieve said, "she must have been very special." There was a hint of challenge in her voice, as if daring him to explain. Gideon took a slow breath. He was a private man by nature and habit, especially about past relationships. Still, Genevieve was his fiancée. She deserved some honesty. "Her name is Nyla," he said quietly, as they began walking down the hall toward Gideon's office suite. We were close, years ago." Genevieve's eyes narrowed slightly. "How close?" Gideon paused at the glass doors to his executive office. He ran a hand through his dark blonde hair, trying to act casual. "We dated for a while," he admitted. That was an understatement, of course. Nyla wasn't just an old flame. She had been the love of his life. But he couldn't find the words to convey that to Genevieve in this moment. Genevieve pursed her lips. Jealousy tugged at her, but she pressed it down. "And the child, the little boy, is he?" "I don't know," Gideon answered honestly, a pained frown on his face. "I have no idea." He realized that if Micah was Nyla's son, the timing could very well mean he was the father. After all, it had been about 4 years since he and Nyla last saw each other. The boy looked around 3 years old. The math made Gideon's head spin. Genevieve put a hand on his arm. "Darling, are you okay?" she asked, softening her tone. She tried to be reassuring, though an uneasy feeling curled in her stomach. She hoped this was just an odd coincidence, not something that would threaten their carefully planned future. "I'm not sure," Gideon murmured. Realizing they were still standing in the hallway, he swiped his keycard to open the office door. "Let's just get inside." They entered the plush corner office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan's skyline. Genevieve set her purse down on a leather chair and turned to Gideon, expecting him to elaborate. But he walked straight to the window, gazing out at the city blankly. "Gideon," Genevieve said gently, joining him at the window. "Do you need to talk about it? This old acquaintance showing up with a child. You seem shaken." Gideon's jaw tightened. "I said, I'm not sure how I feel," he replied, trying not to snap. Truthfully, he was overwhelmed. A storm of emotion brewed inside him, shock at seeing Nyla after so long, curiosity and hope that the child might be his son, and confusion. Why hadn't she ever told him? Genevieve rested a manicured hand on his back soothingly. "It's probably nothing, love. Maybe the child isn't even related to you. You know how small the world can be sometimes, running into someone unexpectedly." "Maybe," Gideon said, though he didn't really believe that. He could not ignore the uncanny resemblance that little boy had to him. And Nyla's face, when she saw Gideon, it was the face of someone with secrets, someone conflicted. Genevieve forced a smile. "How about this? We put it out of our minds for now. We have a lunch appointment to discuss wedding invitations, remember? We shouldn't be late." She was trying to redirect his focus, and Gideon knew it. Normally, he would appreciate how Genevieve kept him organized with personal matters, given his hectic life. But today, he found himself annoyed by her dismissal. Still, he nodded, not wanting to argue. "You're right," he said quietly. "Let's go to the lunch meeting." As Genevieve gathered her things, Gideon stole another glance out the window, his reflection staring back at him in the glass. In that reflection, he almost imagined a small boy with blue eyes like his, perched on his shoulders, laughing. The image shook him to his core. He realized one thing: he needed answers from Nyla, and soon. "I have a son. And I didn't even know? Why wouldn't she tell me?" he thought, heart aching. He knew he wouldn't be able to think of anything else until he confronted Nyla and learned the truth. Silently, Gideon vowed to find Nyla and talk to her, no matter what it took. Little did he know just how many secrets were about to unravel, and how this chance encounter in an elevator would change all of their lives forever. And just like that, one elevator ride changed everything. But here's the question burning in Gideon's mind, and probably yours too. Is that little boy really his son? And if he is, why did Nyla disappear without ever telling him? If you're new to this channel, welcome to the family. We share stories just like this one, full of love, secrets, and those jaw-dropping twists you never see coming. So if you don't want to miss what happens next, tap that subscribe button and hit the bell so you're always in the loop. Now, let's find out what Gideon does next. Because trust me, this story is just getting started. That afternoon passed in a blur for Gideon. He sat through the lunch meeting about wedding invitations, nodding absently. As Genevieve and a planner discussed color schemes and calligraphy, his mind was elsewhere, replaying the elevator scene on loop. Every few minutes, the image of Nyla holding that little boy intruded on his thoughts, sending his heart racing again. Genevieve noticed his distraction. Under the table, she squeezed his hand. "Sweetheart, are you sure you're all right? You're a million miles away," she said softly. Gideon managed a faint smile. "I'm sorry, General, I've got a bit of a headache. Maybe just stress from work." It wasn't a total lie. His temples did throb, but not from work. Still, he preferred this excuse to admitting the truth just yet. Concerned, Genevieve leaned closer. "Do you want to reschedule the rest of the day's meetings? We can go home early and rest." He shook his head. "No, I'll be fine. Let's finish up here first." He gently withdrew his hand and flipped through the sample invitation book in front of him, forcing himself to engage. He didn't want to arouse more of Genevieve's suspicion or worry, but inwardly, he resolved that once this luncheon was over, he would start searching for Nyla immediately. As soon as Gideon returned to his office later, he closed the door and pulled out his phone. He had kept the same number for years, on the off chance that one day Nyla might call. She never had. Now he tried searching his contacts, but her old number, long memorized, had been disconnected years ago. He had no current contact for her at all. Frowning, Gideon buzzed his assistant via intercom. "Marie, could you come in here for a moment?" A moment later, Marie, his efficient middle-aged executive assistant, entered. "Yes, Mr. Sinclair." He offered a brief smile. "Marie, I need a favor. I ran into an old friend today unexpectedly. I'd like to get in touch with her. Could you help me find a current address or phone number?" Marie nodded. "Of course. What's the name?" "Nyla," Gideon said, feeling a strange thrill just to say her name out loud again. "Nyla, and I believe her last name is still Waters. Nyla Waters." The name tasted both sweet and bitter on his tongue, conjuring her laugh, her tears, all of it. Marie jotted it down. "All right. Do you know where she might be living or working?" Gideon rubbed his chin. "She was in this building today, possibly visiting someone on Genevieve's floor. Maybe she works for a company here or had an appointment. Can we check the security logs for visitors around midday?" Marie's eyebrows lifted slightly at the unusual request, but she merely replied, "I'll contact building security and see what I can find out." "Ah, thank you," Gideon said gratefully. "And Marie, keep this discreet, please." She gave a knowing smile. Of course, sir. Working for Gideon, She was well accustomed to handling sensitive matters with confidentiality. While he waited for information, Gideon paced his office. He found himself standing in front of a framed photograph on a bookshelf. A picture of him and Genevieve at a charity gala last year, smiling for the press. Genevieve looked radiant in her gown, and Gideon looked content with his arm around her. It was a picture-perfect image of a power couple, but looking at it now, Gideon felt a pang of guilt. He cared for Genevieve, he truly did. She had been by his side during a dark time when he was heartbroken and vulnerable. But did he love her the way a man should love the woman he marries? He wasn't sure he had ever given Genevieve his whole heart. Part of that heart had remained with Nyla, frozen in time. Gideon inhaled deeply. What am I doing? He questioned himself. He was weeks away from marrying Genevieve, a woman who by all logical measures was a perfect match. And now the sudden reappearance of Nyla threatened to upend everything. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock. Marie stepped back in, holding a note. Security says a Ms. Nyla Waters signed in at the lobby front desk at 11:45 a.m. for a visit to Sinclair Enterprises' HR department on the 18th floor. Gideon blinked in surprise. HR department, here in my building. Marie nodded. Apparently, she had an appointment with one of the HR managers. It looks like she was interviewing for a job position in the company. Gideon's heart skipped. Nyla was interviewing for a job at his company? She must not have known this office building belonged to him. Sinclair Enterprises had many divisions and locations. Or perhaps she did know and chose to come anyway. Either way, fate had intervened by placing them in the same elevator. Do you happen to know if she finished her interview? Gideon asked. He wondered if Nyla left abruptly after seeing him. Marie checked her notes. She signed out at 12:10 p.m., about 25 minutes after signing in, which likely means she did complete the meeting. Perhaps you bumped into her on her way out. Gideon nodded slowly. So she was job hunting, presumably to better provide for her child. He felt a mix of pride at her initiative and anger that he hadn't been there to support them. If Micah was truly his son, Nyla had been raising him alone all this time. But why? Why had she vanished and kept his child a secret? Marie cleared her throat gently. Sir, I also took the liberty of checking our applicant records for today's interviews. Nyla Waters was here to apply for a graphic designer position. She listed her phone and address on the application. She handed Gideon a slip of paper with the information. Gideon took it eagerly. Thank you, Marie. This is extremely helpful. On the paper was a phone number and an address in Harlem. So she still lived in the city, just uptown from here. He resisted the impulse to call immediately. Such a personal conversation should happen face to face. You're welcome. Will there be anything else? Marie asked kindly. Curiosity undoubtedly piqued but kept in check. That will be all for now. And Marie, thank you for doing this quickly. After his assistant left, Gideon moved to his desk and sat down heavily, staring at Nyla's phone number. He tapped it into his cell phone contacts but didn't hit dial. Instead, he decided he would go see her in person. He needed to look into her eyes when she told him the truth. Gideon's decision made, he told Marie to clear his remaining schedule for the day. He sent a quick text to Genevieve, not feeling well, decided to take the afternoon off to rest. We'll call you later. It wasn't far from the truth. His nerves were in turmoil. Not 5 minutes later, Genevieve replied, Oh no. Feel better, darling. Do you want me to come over tonight? Gideon felt a stab of guilt for deceiving her, but he typed back, Thanks, but I just need to sleep it off. I'll see you tomorrow. Genevieve responded with a simple heart emoji and love you. He sighed and pocketed his phone. He wasn't proud of hiding his true plans, but this was something he had to handle alone first. If he told Genevieve he was rushing off to see an ex-girlfriend who might have his child, it would only create chaos and pain before he even knew the facts. Better to know everything, then figure out how to move forward. By late afternoon, Gideon found himself standing outside a modest apartment building on a quiet street in Harlem. The sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. He double-checked the address from the paper. Yes, This was where Nyla lived now, apparently. His heart thundered in his chest as he approached the building's front steps. He realized he was nervous, more nervous than he'd been for any business deal or public speech. This was a confrontation 4 years in the making. Gideon climbed the stairs, finding the name N. Waters on one of the mailboxes. Apartment 3B. He pressed the intercom buzzer for 3 billions and waited, palms beginning to sweat. A crackle, and then a familiar soft voice came through. "Hello?" Gideon's breath hitched. Hearing her voice again was like a jolt to his system. "Nyla, it's me, Gideon," he said into the intercom. "Can I come up? We need to talk." There was a long pause. He wondered if she might refuse. Then the door buzzed as the lock released. She hadn't said a word, but she was letting him in. Gideon swallowed hard and pulled the door open. He climbed 2 flights of stairs to the 3rd floor. The hallway was narrow and the paint a bit faded, but it was clean and homey. He found door 3B and stood there for a moment, steadying himself. Finally, he raised a hand and knocked lightly. The door opened slowly. Nyla stood there, appearing apprehensive. She had changed from earlier. Now she wore a casual soft sweater and leggings. Her feet were bare on the hardwood. Gideon noticed the little boy, Micah, peeking out from behind her legs, clutching a toy dinosaur. The child gazed up at Gideon curiously. An awkward silence fell. Gideon's eyes met Nyla's. Up close, she was just as beautiful as he remembered, perhaps more so. There was a maturity to her now, a quiet strength in how she carried herself, but also wariness in her expression. "Hi," Gideon said gently. "Thank you for letting me up." Nyla nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." Her voice was calm but guarded. As Gideon entered, he instinctively smiled at Micah. The boy, a bit shy, retreated behind his mother's legs again, once this tall stranger was inside. The apartment was small but welcoming. Toys were neatly arranged in a corner of the living room. The walls had colorful framed illustrations, likely Nyla's own artwork if she was pursuing graphic design. There was the scent of something savory in the air, maybe from dinner preparation. Gideon took a few tentative steps inside. He was hyper-aware of Nyla standing so close and the child who might be his son just feet away. He turned to face Nyla, his heart pounding with a mixture of longing and hurt. "Nyla, he began, but trailed off, unsure how to start. Nyla pressed her lips together. "Would you like to sit?" she offered, gesturing to the couch. "Yes, thanks," Gideon murmured. He sat on the edge of the sofa. Nyla sat in an armchair across from him, still holding Micah's hand. The boy climbed into her lap, sensing the serious atmosphere. Micah looked at Gideon with big eyes, then spoke in a small voice, mispronouncing the word slightly. "Who dat, mummy?" Nyla brushed a curl from the boy's forehead, her expression softening as she addressed him. "Micah, sweetie, this is Gideon. He's an old friend of mummy's." The term old friend made Gideon flinch internally, but he understood she wouldn't throw explanations at a toddler. He gave Micah a little wave. "Hi, Micah," he said, his voice warm but tinged with emotion. "It's nice to meet you." Micah buried his face against Nyla, suddenly bashful. Gideon's heart squeezed at the sight. He longed to scoop the child up, to confirm what he already suspected. But he had to proceed carefully. Nyla patted her son's back. "Micah, why don't you go play with your toys for a bit, honey? I need to talk to Mr. Gideon." The boy shook his head, clinging tighter. "No, I stay wife you." It was clear Micah didn't want to leave his mother with a stranger around. Gideon smiled. "It's okay, Micah. I promise I'm not scary." Micah peeped up at him again, taking in Gideon's friendly smile. Tentatively, he wriggled out of Nyla's lap and toddled over to his pile of toys, but he kept glancing back at the two adults. Once Micah was semi-distracted, stacking some blocks, Nyla folded her hands and looked at Gideon directly. "I guess we should talk." Gideon nodded, pulse racing. There was so much he wanted to ask, but one question pressed above all others. He leaned forward and spoke in a hushed tone. "Nyla, is he mine? Is Micah my son?" Nyla's eyes glistened. She had expected this question from the moment she saw Gideon in that elevator. Still, hearing it out loud made her heart lurch. She took a breath. "Yes," she whispered. "Micah is your son, Gideon." Even having suspected it, the confirmation hit Gideon like a tidal wave. He closed his eyes briefly. Overcome. "My son. I have a son." When he opened them again, they were wet with unshed tears. Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, voice cracking. "All these years, Nyla. I never knew." Nyla bit her lip, anguish etched on her face. "I wanted to, so many times, but I thought you wouldn't want us, that you had moved on." She looked down, twisting her fingers. "After the way things ended, I truly believed you didn't love me anymore and that your family would never accept me or our baby." Gideon felt a surge of frustration and pain. "How could you think I wouldn't want my own child, or you?" he said, perhaps more sharply than intended. He lowered his tone, seeing her flinch. "I'm sorry, but please help me understand. We were in love, planning a future. Then you disappeared without a word except that note. I was devastated, Nyla, and now I find out you were carrying my baby when you left. It breaks my heart to think of you going through that alone." Nyla's eyes filled with tears now. She glanced over to ensure Micah was still occupied, then spoke haltingly. "I was devastated too, Gideon. Leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I truly thought I had no choice." Her voice trembled. "The day I left, your mother came to see me." Gideon's expression darkened in surprise. "My mother? She never told me she saw you." Nyla let out a bitter laugh under her breath. "I'm not surprised. She came to warn me off. She told me that you had a bright future ahead and that I didn't fit into it, that I was not the right kind of woman for you." Pain and remembered humiliation flickered in Nyla's eyes. Gideon felt heat rise in his face. He could well imagine the sort of things his mother, Margaret Sinclair, might have said. She had always been concerned with appearances and had made subtle disapproving comments about Nyla's background and even her race during the time they dated. "What exactly did she say to you?" he asked gently, though dread coiled in his stomach. "She implied very clearly that you were going to be engaged to someone else, someone from a wealthy family, a woman named Genevieve," Nyla recalled, voice cracking on Genevieve's name. "She said there was already an arrangement in motion and that you were too kind to tell me that our relationship was just a fling. She even brought an envelope of money, hush money, I suppose, as if I could be paid to walk away quietly." Nyla's tears slipped free now. "I refused the money. But I believed her when she said you were done with me." Gideon's hands balled into fists on his knees. "That's a lie," he hissed, keeping his voice low but intense. "There was no arrangement. Genevieve was just a family friend back then. I never ever told my mother I was done with you. I was in love with you, Nyla. I planned to ask you to marry me." He stopped, realizing he had practically shouted that last part. In the corner, Micah looked up from his blocks, startled. Nyla's breath caught. You were going to propose?" she whispered, eyes wide with shock and sorrow. Gideon nodded, trying to rein in his emotions for Micah's sake. He spoke in a softer tone. "Yes, I had a ring and everything. The night I came home and found you gone, I was confused and heartbroken. There was just that short letter from you saying goodbye and not to look for you. I didn't understand at all." Nyla wiped at her cheeks, her shoulders shaking. "I wrote that because your mother insisted I make a clean break. She said if I really loved you, I'd let you go gracefully and not drag you down. I thought I was doing the right thing for you, and when I found out I was pregnant a few weeks later, I was terrified. I knew the Sinclairs could try to take the baby or make my life miserable, and since I believed you were engaged to someone else, I decided to just raise him on my own." She swallowed hard. "I convinced myself you'd be happier without us." A silence fell, heavy with the weight of 4 lost years. Gideon felt tears sting his eyes, hearing how much she had endured. He shook his head slowly. "Nyla, I would have been happier with you. With both of you." He glanced toward Micah, who was now rolling a toy truck on the floor, thankfully not fully grasping the serious conversation. Gideon lowered his voice tenderly. You should never have had to go through pregnancy and raising our son alone. I'm so sorry. Nyla looked at him, seeing genuine anguish on his face. This was the man she had loved, the father of her child. And now it seemed they were both victims of a cruel deception. I'm sorry too, she said, reaching up to dash away a tear. Sorry for believing the lies and not having the courage to confront you back then. I was just so hurt and confused. Gideon, acting on impulse, gently moved off the sofa and knelt in front of Nyla's chair. He took her hands in his. I wish you had come to me, or that I had tried harder to find you, he said mournfully. I looked for weeks, you know. I tried contacting your friends, but no one knew where you went. I even hired a private investigator eventually, but with you changing your number and moving apartments, we hit dead ends. You vanished. Nyla's face softened as she felt the warmth of his hands, a familiar comfort she'd missed. I went to stay with an old college friend out of state for a while, she admitted. I left the city to clear my head and plan for the baby. I didn't want to be found at the time. I was too afraid of what might happen if your family knew about the baby. Gideon's eyes hardened slightly. My family, no, my mother, has a lot to answer for. I can't believe she interfered to that extent. His voice was laced with anger, but he squeezed Nyla's hands reassuringly. But right now, I'm more concerned about you and Micah. At the mention of his name, the little boy looked over again. This time, he stood up, holding his toy truck, and waddled closer to his mother and the kneeling man. Mummy, why are you crying? Micah asked, seeing her damp eyes. Nyla let go of one of Gideon's hands to stroke her son's cheek. Mommy's okay, sweetie. These are just happy, sad tears. She gave a shaky smile. Come here. Micah climbed onto her lap again, eyeing Gideon warily but with curiosity. Gideon felt an overwhelming urge to properly introduce himself to his child. He carefully smiled and said, Hi, Micah. He glanced at Nyla for permission or guidance. She gave him a tiny nod, silently encouraging him. Gideon's throat tightened, but he continued gently, I'm your daddy. Micah blinked, processing the unfamiliar word from this stranger. Daddy, he repeated softly. He had seen other kids with fathers, heard the term in storybooks, but he'd never used it for anyone in his life until now. Yes, sweetheart, Nyla confirmed in a tender voice, hugging Micah from behind. This is your daddy. I know it's a surprise meeting him today. Micah looked between his mother and Gideon. He then reached out a small hand and touched Gideon's face, as if to see if he was real. Gideon let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. The little hand on his cheek was warm and trusting. Gideon gently took that tiny hand in his own. It's very nice to meet you, Micah, he said, voice thick with emotion. I'm so happy I get to see you. Micah gave a shy smile. You, my daddy, he stated with a nod, as if confirming to himself. Then, to Gideon's surprise, the boy wriggled forward out of Nyla's lap and into Gideon's arms with innocent boldness. Gideon instinctively gathered him up, holding Micah close. The boy's weight and warmth in his arms made Gideon's eyes spill over with tears. He had missed the baby years, but he was holding his son now. It felt like a missing piece of his soul clicked into place. Nyla watched, tears flowing freely down her cheeks as Gideon hugged their child for the first time. It was a bittersweet sight, heartwarming and heartbreaking at once. She could see the instant, natural love in Gideon's expression as he cradled Micah, and the contentment in Micah as the boy settled against his father's chest. After a long moment, Gideon gently pulled back enough to look at Micah's face. You are such a brave, good boy, he told him softly. I'm sorry I wasn't here for you before, but I promise I'll be here for you from now on, okay? Micah didn't fully understand the apology, but he smiled and pointed to the shiny cufflink on Gideon's sleeve, distracted. What Gideon chuckled softly through his tears. It's a cufflink. You like it? You can have it, little man. He proceeded to unfasten the cufflink, a small silver piece, and handed it to Micah to play with. The toddler examined it like a treasure. Nyla quietly wiped her tears, relief washing over her. This introduction had gone better than she feared. Micah already seemed comfortable. She realized she had worried for years how she would ever explain his father's absence. Now, miraculously, Gideon was here, embracing fatherhood without hesitation. Gideon carefully rose from his kneeling position, carrying Micah with him, and sat back on the couch. Micah happily babbled about the cufflink, and Gideon listened, nodding as though it was the most fascinating story in the world. Nyla remained in the armchair, watching father and son bond with an aching heart full of love and regret. Eventually, Micah slid off Gideon's lap, toddling back to his blocks, now clenching the cufflink in one fist as a new toy. Gideon turned to Nyla, who had regained some composure. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for raising him so well. I can tell he's an amazing kid. And that's all you. You've done an incredible job, Nyla." She gave a humble shrug. "I did what I could. It hasn't been easy, but he's a good boy. Very smart and sweet." She hesitated, then added softly, "He reminds me of you sometimes. The way he concentrates with a little frown, or how he loves animals." She smiled at a memory. One of his first words was dog, because he'd point at every puppy on the street. Gideon chuckled, warmed that she saw him in Micah. "I can't believe all the things I missed," he said sadly. "His first steps, first words. I wish I could have been there." Nyla reached over and gently touched Gideon's hand, a spontaneous gesture of comfort. "You're here now. That's what matters. He has a lot more growing up to do, and now you can be part of it." Their eyes met, holding a tender moment. Gideon turned his hand over to grasp hers. The contact sent a familiar spark through both of them, a reminder of the chemistry they once shared. Nyla felt her cheeks warm, and she started to pull her hand back, unsure. But Gideon held on, not tightly, just enough to convey he wasn't ready to let go again. "Nyla," he said softly, "I still can't fully wrap my head around everything. But I know one thing. I want to be in Micah's life, in any way you'll allow. I want to be here for you both." He drew a breath, heart pounding as he continued. "I've never stopped caring about you. Seeing you today, it brought back so much. I thought I had lost you forever, and now here you are. I don't want to lose you again." Nyla's eyes shimmered. "Gideon," she whispered. It sounded like half a plea and half an apology. Her heart longed to say she felt the same, that her love for him had lived on in her lonely nights. But reality was complicated now. "You're engaged," she said, barely audible. She glanced at the subtle but expensive band on his finger, a match to the one Genevieve wore. In their emotional confrontation, she'd nearly forgotten. Gideon winced and finally released her hand, raking his fingers through his hair. He had almost forgotten too. For a blissful moment, nothing existed but Nyla and their son. But yes, he was still technically engaged to Genevieve. I need to figure that out," he said heavily. "I can't marry Genevieve when all of this is happening. It wouldn't be fair to her or to myself." Nyla nodded slowly. She respected Genevieve in a distant way. After all, the woman had done nothing wrong except fall in love with Gideon. Nyla's conscience nagged. She didn't want to be the reason another woman's heart broke. "Genevieve loves you, I assume," Nyla said carefully. "This will hurt her." Gideon sighed. "I never meant to hurt anyone. Genevieve has been good to me. But I don't love her the way a husband should love a wife," he admitted. "I think a part of me closed off after I lost you. Being with her was easy and pleasant, but it wasn't what we had." Nyla's heart skipped. Hearing that gave her hope, yet also guilt. "You might find that feeling with her given time," she offered uncertainly, even as her own heart protested. He shook his head. "I don't want her to be second best, and she deserves someone who can give her their whole heart. I need to be honest with her, and with myself." Gideon looked at Nyla earnestly. "My heart has always held on to you, even when I tried to move on. Seeing you again only makes it clearer." Nyla felt tears forming anew. There was so much love and sorrow between them. "I care for you too, Gideon. I never stopped, but I'm scared. So much has happened." He reached for her hand again, and this time she let him take it. I know, and I'm willing to take things slow, one step at a time. My first priority is our son. I want to support you two however I can, financially, emotionally, anything. You've been doing it all alone, and I can lighten that burden now. Nyla squeezed his hand. Part of her hated the idea of taking money, pride still lingering, but she knew he was right. Micah deserved all the support both parents could give. Thank you. I have a consistent freelance job now, but I'm not going to refuse help for Micah's sake. College funds, childcare, it would make a difference. Consider it done, Gideon said instantly. And about that job, you were interviewing at Sinclair Enterprises, right? You're a graphic designer? Nyla nodded. Yes, I freelance currently, but I was hoping to get a stable position. She hesitated, looking slightly embarrassed. I knew it was your family's company, Gideon. But Sinclair Enterprises has thousands of employees across dozens of floors and locations. I figured the chances of actually running into you were slim to none. I needed the job, and the design department had great reviews. She gave a rueful laugh. I never imagined we'd end up in the same elevator on my way out. He gave a small smile. It's a big company, and I don't personally oversee design hires, so I wouldn't have known. But if you still want it, the job is yours. I'll make sure of it. Nyla flushed slightly, shaking her head. I don't want special treatment or for anyone to think I got hired because of connections. I want to earn it on my own merit. Gideon looked impressed. That was so like her, fiercely independent. Fair enough. I'll stay out of it then. But I have confidence you'll get it. Just let me know if you need any recommendations or anything. Okay, she said appreciatively. They fell into a brief silence, the intensity easing. Micah was now zooming his toy truck around, making vroom noises, blissfully, unaware of how significant this day was for his little life. Nyla broke the silence tentatively. What about your mother? She asked. When she finds out about Micah, I'm worried. Gideon's expression hardened. I will handle my mother. She lost the right to meddle when she lied to both of us. I think once I tell my father and her that they have a grandson, my father at least will be thrilled. Mom, she'll have to adjust. She can't undo this with money or threats. I won't let her near you or Micah, unless she respects both of you fully. Nyla gave a half smile. She remembered Charles Sinclair, Gideon's father, as a kinder soul, whereas Margaret was the tough one. That's reassuring. Gideon glanced at the clock on the wall. It was early evening now, and he realized he'd been here a couple of hours. It felt like minutes and a lifetime at once. I should probably go soon. There's a lot I need to sort out tonight, he said, reluctantly, thinking of the inevitable hard conversation with Genevieve. Nyla stood as he did. Of course, it's been a day full of surprises. She walked him to the door, Micah trailing after them with his truck. At the door, Gideon crouched down to meet Micah's eyes. Hey, buddy, I have to go for now, but can I see you again soon? Micah pouted a little. You go bye-bye. For a little bit, Gideon said softly. It stung to leave, knowing the boy had just met him and likely didn't understand. But I'll come back, I promise. Maybe tomorrow? We can go to the park or get ice cream. Would you like that? Micah's eyes lit up at ice cream. He nodded vigorously. Yes. Gideon laughed gently and ruffled his son's curls, an act that felt so natural it brought a lump to his throat. All right, I'll talk to Mommy and we'll plan it. He then stood to face Nyla. He yearned to hug her, to close the chasm of years with a single embrace, but he wasn't sure if it would be welcome. Sensing his hesitation, Nyla made the move. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Gideon in a warm, heartfelt hug. Gideon immediately enveloped her, holding her close. The feel of her against him, the scent of her hair, it was achingly familiar, and yet new. Both of them shut their eyes, savoring the moment. Nyla felt safe in his arms. Gideon felt whole with her in his. I missed you, he whispered, barely audible. I missed you too, she whispered back, voice trembling. There was so much more to say, but these simple words carried years of longing. They separated slowly. Gideon cupped her cheek for a brief second, his thumb wiping a stray tear from her skin. He gave her a gentle, reassuring smile. "I'll call you later, all right? And we'll set up time for tomorrow." "Okay," Nyla agreed softly. Her heart fluttered. It felt surreal that this was happening, that Gideon was back and genuinely wanted to be part of their lives. With reluctance, Gideon finally stepped out into the hallway. Micah waved his little hand. "Bye-bye, Daddy," he said, testing the new word with a grin. Joy and determination surged in Gideon. "Goodbye, Micah. See you soon." As Nyla closed the door, Gideon stood for a moment in the dim hallway, his emotions swirling. He felt anger toward his mother's manipulation, guilt over Genevieve, but above all, a profound sense of gratitude and hope. He had a son, and Nyla was back in his life. He intended to make things right, with honesty and love this time. With renewed resolve, Gideon headed down the stairs. There were challenges ahead, but for the first time in years, his heart felt alive. 5 years ago, New York City, a younger Gideon stepped out of a black town car onto a bustling Manhattan sidewalk. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, golden leaves swirling around as he adjusted the cuffs of his suit. At 29, he was already making headlines as a rising star in the tech industry, but today he was trying to blend in. He had come to a modest community art gallery downtown, drawn by a small exhibition that few would expect a billionaire's son to attend. Inside the gallery, 25-year-old Nyla Waters stood by one of her paintings, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. This was her first public art showcase since graduating with a fine arts degree. Though she now worked as a freelance graphic designer to pay the bills, painting was her passion. She had spent weeks preparing for this event. Nyla smoothed her simple teal dress and checked the arrangement of business cards on the table. As a black woman in the predominantly white art scene, she sometimes felt out of place. But tonight, she was determined to shine on her own merit. Gideon entered the gallery quietly, alone, hoping to go unrecognized. He scanned the room of colorful artwork and the small gathering of art enthusiasts and friends of the artists. His eyes landed on a painting across the room, a vibrant cityscape at dawn, full of life and hope. Drawn to it, he approached. Nyla noticed the tall, handsome stranger studying her painting. She walked over, heart thumping slightly. It was always thrilling and intimidating to watch someone examine her work. "Hello," she greeted with a warm smile. "Are you enjoying the show?" Gideon turned and nearly lost his composure. The woman before him was stunning, not in the flashy, polished way of the socialites he knew, but in an authentic, radiant way. Her eyes sparkled with creativity and kindness. For a moment, he forgot to speak. Yes, I am," he replied, regaining his voice. He gestured to the painting, this one especially. The colors, the energy. "It's captivating." Nyla flushed with pride. "Thank you. This one's mine." She stepped beside him and looked at the canvas. "I call it Morning in Harlem. I try to capture the feeling of a new day in the city, full of possibilities." "You succeeded," Gideon said softly, still looking at her more than the painting. "It's wonderful. You have a real talent." She met his eyes and felt a pleasant flutter. "That means a lot." "I'm Nyla, by the way." He smiled and extended his hand. "Gideon, it's a pleasure to meet you, Nyla." As their hands touched, both felt a surprising spark of connection. Nyla tilted her head. "Gideon, you look familiar somehow. Have we met?" Gideon hesitated. He was vaguely aware that his face had been in some business magazines recently, but he doubted she'd recognize him from that. "I don't think so. Perhaps we've crossed paths in another life," he said playfully. She laughed lightly. "Perhaps." There was something magnetic about him. His confidence was tempered by a gentle manner that put her at ease. Gideon found himself drawn into easy conversation with Nyla. They strolled through the gallery together as she showed him her other pieces. He asked thoughtful questions about her inspirations, clearly intrigued. Nyla was surprised to find this stranger had such a genuine interest in art. Most wealthy men she'd met at events feigned interest or were condescending. But Gideon seemed different. As they chatted, Gideon tactfully avoided mentioning his last name or wealth. He was enjoying being seen simply as himself, not as a high-profile billionaire. He found Nyla's passion and wit refreshing. When she spoke of her dreams and her community, her whole face lit up. After an hour, the exhibition began winding down. Many attendees left, and Nyla began helping clean up. Gideon stayed, insisting on lending a hand stacking chairs and gathering trash. Nyla was amused. "You really don't have to do this. You're a guest." He shrugged, smiling. "I don't mind. I'm a firm believer that no one's too important to stack chairs." That earned him an approving grin from her. When the work was done and they stepped outside, dusk had fallen. The city lights were blinking on. Gideon felt a tug of disappointment that the night might end here. He didn't want to part ways with Nyla just yet. Summoning courage that usually only emerged in boardrooms, he asked, "Have you had dinner? If not, maybe I could treat you, to celebrate a successful show." Nyla was pleasantly surprised. She normally didn't agree to late dinners with near strangers, but something about Gideon's earnestness and charm made her throw caution to the wind. "You know what? Dinner sounds great," she agreed. They found a cozy little bistro nearby. Over pasta and wine, conversation flowed effortlessly. They discovered a mutual love for jazz music, a curiosity about travel, and a shared value of humility despite different upbringings. Nyla talked about growing up in a working-class family in Brooklyn, and Gideon listened intently, sharing some of his own experiences growing up under the expectations of a wealthy family. When the check came, Gideon paid despite Nyla's protestations. "Next time, I'm paying," she insisted with a teasing glare. "Next time," he echoed with a broad smile, happy that she was already anticipating seeing him again. Walking her to the subway after dinner, Gideon felt a buoyant happiness. Under a street lamp, he gently took Nyla's hand, causing her to look up at him with a shy smile. "I had a wonderful time tonight," he said. "I'd love to see you again, soon." Nyla squeezed his hand. "I'd like that too, Gideon." They exchanged phone numbers. Gideon, still holding her hand, felt an urge to kiss her goodnight. He leaned in slightly, giving her plenty of time to refuse. Nyla's breath caught, her heart pounding as she sensed his intention. She didn't pull away. In the golden light of the city evening, Gideon softly pressed his lips to hers in a tender, gentle kiss. Nyla melted into the moment. It was sweet and electric all at once. When they parted, both were smiling like teenagers. "Good night, Gideon," she whispered, cheeks flushed. "Good night, Nyla," he replied, reluctance in his voice, as she turned to descend into the subway station. All the way home, Nyla felt like she was walking on air. She replayed the night in her head, the kind billionaire with a heart, though she still didn't know he was a billionaire, the connection they shared, that magical first kiss. Gideon rode home in his car, touching his lips in disbelief at his luck. He hadn't planned on meeting anyone at the gallery, let alone someone who made him feel so alive and seen. That was the beginning. In the weeks that followed, Gideon and Nyla fell swiftly and deeply in love. They were an unlikely pair in the eyes of the world, a white American man from extreme wealth and a black American woman from a modest background, but their differences only drew them closer, teaching each other new perspectives. They kept their romance somewhat discreet and private, partly out of Gideon's instinct to protect Nyla from media scrutiny, and partly because they cherished the intimacy of their own world. Gideon would whisk Nyla away on quiet dates, hidden gem jazz clubs in the city, moonlit walks by the Hudson River, or cooking dinner together in the kitchen of his penthouse while dancing to old records. Nyla teased Gideon about his cooking skills, or lack thereof, and he laughed freely with her, a side of him even his friends rarely saw. In turn, Gideon supported Nyla's dreams, funding a small community art program in her neighborhood and attending local events with her, where he blended in jeans and t-shirts, happy to be by her side rather than at stuffy galas. It wasn't all easy. There were challenges. Nyla felt overwhelmed at times by Gideon's world. Once, paparazzi snapped a photo of them exiting a restaurant, and a tabloid ran a speculative piece on Gideon's mystery girlfriend. Nyla worried about becoming gossip fodder, but Gideon reassured her, doubling down on keeping their life as normal as possible. And Gideon's family. Well, introductions had been rocky. Another flashback continuing the story of their past. About a year into their relationship, Gideon decided it was time for Nyla to meet his parents. He knew his mother Margaret had her biases, but he hoped she'd see how happy Nyla made him. His father Charles was easier to please, a genial man who just wanted his son happy. One summer evening, Gideon brought Nyla to the Sinclairs' sprawling estate in Connecticut for dinner. Nyla wore a lovely blue sundress, trying to hide her nerves. Gideon held her hand the entire drive, promising it would be fine. But from the moment Margaret Sinclair greeted them at the door, her tight smile and assessing eyes put Nyla on edge. Dinner was formal and awkward. Margaret peppered Nyla with questions that felt loaded. "So what do your parents do, dear? Where did you go to school? How do you manage living in the city on an artist's income?" Charles noticed and tried to ease the tension by complimenting Nyla's work. Gideon had proudly shown his father her paintings earlier, but Margaret's vibe remained cool. Gideon squeezed Nyla's knee under the table supportively each time his mother's tone bordered on patronizing. Later, when Nyla stepped away to the powder room, Margaret seized the chance to speak her mind to Gideon privately in the parlor. "She seems nice, Gideon, but is this really serious?" his mother asked in a hushed tone. "Yes, mother. Very serious," Gideon replied firmly. "I love her." Margaret pursed her lips. "Love? You haven't known her that long. And have you considered how such a relationship will be perceived? You come from very different worlds." She stirred her tea idly, avoiding directly stating the racial difference but heavily implying it. "Your circles, your business connections. Compatibility is important." Gideon's jaw tightened. "Nyla and I are perfectly compatible. She's intelligent, kind, and we share the same values. If our circles have an issue, then that's their problem, not ours." Margaret sighed, as if speaking to a naive child. "Darling, I just want what's best for you. A stable, respectable partner who understands our lifestyle. I had hoped you might rekindle things with Genevieve Kensington. You two grew up together, and her family is—" "Genevieve is a friend, nothing more." Gideon cut her off, irritation rising. "I can't believe you're bringing her up, when I'm telling you I love Nyla." Margaret gave him a long, disappointed look. "I won't push, Gideon, but I do urge you to think long-term. Marriage, children, these are big decisions. It's easier when families are well-matched. The Kensingtons, for instance." Gideon stood abruptly, not wanting to hear more. "If you can't be happy for me, then at least be polite. Please don't ruin this evening for Nyla." Margaret fell silent, lips thinning. She nodded once, acquiescing outwardly, but her eyes glinted with resolve. After that dinner, Nyla told Gideon on the drive home that she sensed his mother's disapproval. Gideon apologized profusely and reaffirmed his commitment. "It doesn't matter what she thinks," he insisted, kissing Nyla's hand. "What matters is how we feel. I want you in my life forever." Nyla believed him, and for a time they were blissfully happy, making plans for the future. They discussed moving in together. Gideon even quietly looked at rings, planning a proposal. However, Margaret Sinclair was not a woman to give up easily. Unbeknownst to Gideon, she reached out to Nyla under the guise of a friendly meet-up a few weeks later. Nyla, hoping to win her over, agreed to meet for tea at an upscale hotel. What Nyla thought would be a cordial chat turned into a devastating ambush. Margaret was polite at first, but after pleasantries, she got to the point. "I admire your ambition, my dear, and it's clear you care for my son," Margaret said, stirring sugar into her tea. "But love isn't always enough. Gideon has certain responsibilities and expectations as a Sinclair. I worry that the pressure of our world will be too much for you. He would eventually realize that too, and I'd hate for either of you to face heartbreak down the line." Nyla sat stiffly, cup in hand. "Mrs. Sinclair, I assure you I only want what's best for Gideon. We make each other happy. I know our backgrounds are different, but that doesn't mean we can't build a life together." Margaret gave a thin smile. "You are mature beyond your years, Nyla. Let me be frank, Gideon is slated to take over as CEO of Sinclair Enterprises soon. Having a wife who can navigate high society, host fundraisers, and converse at his level is crucial. I fear you would be out of your depth. Her eyes flicked over Nyla's simple dress, as if to emphasize the point. Hot humiliation crept up Nyla's neck. You underestimate me, she said quietly, fighting to keep her voice steady. Margaret sighed, as if regretting what she had to do. I wish I did, but the world can be cruel. Imagine the gossip, the scrutiny you'd endure. I'm trying to spare you both. Gideon will move on. In time, perhaps back to someone like Genevieve who suits him. You too can find someone more aligned with your life. It's better to make a clean break now before things get messy. For instance, it would be truly unfortunate if you two rushed into marriage, or, heaven forbid, had a child together under these circumstances. Nyla's heart pounded. The veiled threat was clear. Margaret would not tolerate Nyla having a permanent tie to her son, like a marriage or baby. It sent a chill through her because just the night before, Gideon had mentioned starting a family one day with such joy. Margaret's words planted icy doubt in Nyla's mind about the reality of that dream. I won't break up with Gideon just because you fear scandal, Nyla said, voice harder now. Margaret studied her, then reached into her designer handbag and placed an envelope on the table. Inside is a check, a rather large sum. Consider it a gift, to help you start fresh, perhaps pursue your art somewhere new. All I ask is that you sever things with Gideon and keep this conversation private. It will be better for him, for you, and for any future you want, out of the shadow of our family. Nyla stared at the envelope in disbelief, tears of outrage and hurt brimming. You're bribing me to leave your son? Margaret's expression was unapologetic. If you truly love him, you'll do what's best. Sometimes love means sacrifice. Gideon will thank you in time when he realizes you saved him from a difficult situation. Nyla felt physically ill. She stood abruptly, hands trembling. Mrs. Sinclair, I don't want your money, and I never want to be spoken to like this again. Gideon loves me, and I love him. You're wrong about us. Her voice broke at the end, despite her attempt to sound strong. Margaret remained seated, calmly sipping her tea. If you walk out now and refuse this offer, then prepare for a fight you can't win. I will do everything in my power to ensure Gideon's path doesn't include you. And believe me, my dear, I have considerable power in this city. The older woman's eyes were like steel. Your art career, your employment, even your lease. Those things can become very difficult if I pull some strings, but I'd prefer not to. I'm not your enemy, Nyla. I'm a mother protecting her son. Surely you understand that. Nyla's blood ran cold. Margaret had just threatened her livelihood and stability. And perhaps she was right. With her influence, she could blackball Nyla from galleries, persuade landlords or clients to drop her. Life could become a nightmare. If Gideon stood by Nyla through all that, he'd be virtually waging war against his own family, harming his company, his reputation. It could destroy him professionally and personally. Nyla felt tears sliding down her face. She angrily wiped them. You claim to love your son, but you're willing to hurt him by driving away someone he loves. Margaret's face softened just a fraction. He'll heal, he's young, and first loves often fade. Better a bruise now than a deep wound later. You too will heal and find your place in the world. Realizing nothing she said would sway this woman, Nyla swallowed her pride and pain. She picked up the envelope, if only to make Margaret think she agreed. Fine, she whispered. You win. Margaret nodded approvingly. It's for the best. Use the money well. And I trust you'll keep this conversation just between us. Nyla's heart shattered as she left the hotel, the envelope clutched in her hand. She barely made it a block before ducking into a quiet alley, sobbing. Her world was falling apart. How could she possibly break Gideon's heart on purpose? How could she give up the love of her life because his mother demanded it? Over the next 2 days, Nyla wrestled with herself, scarcely eating or sleeping. She ignored Gideon's calls and texts, telling him she was ill to avoid seeing him. She cried until she had no tears left. Every scenario played out painfully, If she stayed with him, his mother would torment them, maybe even ruin Nyla's ability to provide for herself. If she left, she would break both their hearts, but perhaps save him from losing his family's support and company. In a cruel twist of timing, it was on the second day that Nyla realized she was late, her monthly cycle. With shaking hands, she took a pregnancy test and watched as it turned positive. Nyla sank to the bathroom floor, new sobs racking her. It was as if fate was playing a joke. The very thing Margaret warned against had already happened secretly. Now what? If Margaret learned Nyla was pregnant, she might try to take the baby or publicly smear her as a gold digger trapping Gideon. Could Gideon protect her from all that? Possibly, but at what cost to him? He would drop everything to shield her and the baby, but that might mean cutting off his family entirely and dealing with their wrath. Nyla couldn't stomach being the cause of such a rift, nor could she bear the thought of their child being fought over like a scandal. After agonizing deliberation, Nyla made the hardest decision of her life. She would leave Gideon, disappear entirely, and raise this baby alone. It was the only way to keep her child out of the Sinclair family's toxic battle, and to allow Gideon to live the life his mother wanted for him, unencumbered. Perhaps one day, if circumstances changed, she'd tell him. But for now, she would shoulder the burden. She left Margaret's check uncashed and torn in half on her kitchen counter, refusing to profit from this heartbreak. In the early dawn, she packed a suitcase and wrote a short letter. When Gideon arrived at her apartment that morning, worried after days of minimal contact, he found the door unlocked and rooms empty of her belongings. On the table lay her apartment key and a folded note addressed to him. With growing panic, Gideon opened it and read, "Dear Gideon, I'm sorry to do this in a letter, but I can't face you. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Please don't try to find me. Our lives are just too different, and I realize now I don't belong in your world. You'll be better off without me holding you back. Thank you for loving me and showing me happiness this past year. I will never forget it, or you. But this is goodbye, Nyla." Gideon felt the color drain from his face. He read it over and over, refusing to believe it. This made no sense. Things had been wonderful, they had plans. How could she just leave? Heart pounding, he searched the apartment, calling her name, but it was truly empty. He noticed some paintings gone. She'd taken her most personal things. Tears blurred his vision. In confusion and devastation, Gideon tried calling her, straight to voicemail. He tried contacting her close friends he knew. They were either as surprised as him or possibly covering for her, because no one gave him any leads. It was as if she had evaporated. He confronted his mother, desperate for answers, asking if she had said something to Nyla. Margaret feigned ignorance, shock even. "She left you? Oh, darling, I'm so sorry," she said, wrapping him in a hug while hiding her triumph. Perhaps she wasn't ready for commitment. "This must be so painful for you." Gideon felt hollow and betrayed. Over the following weeks, he did everything to find Nyla, hired investigators, scoured social media, even went to her favorite spots. Nothing. It was like she'd never existed beyond the memories that haunted him. He never knew about the unborn child she carried as she left. He never knew that as he sank into grief, Nyla was sobbing in a friend's guest room across state lines, holding her belly and apologizing to the life inside her for what would be a complicated start. All he knew was that the love of his life was gone, and he didn't understand why. In the end, to cope with the unbearable pain, Gideon hardened his heart. He buried himself in work and eventually allowed his mother to steer him back into the social scene. About a year later, Genevieve Kensington and he crossed paths at a charity event, and with his mother, his encouragement and his own loneliness, Gideon slowly fell into a relationship with Genevieve. It was comfortable and safe, but he never truly gave her his whole heart. How could he, when so many nights he still dreamt of Nyla? Can you believe that? Margaret literally destroyed their relationship, and Gideon never even knew. 4 years. 4 years of Nyla raising their son alone, thinking Gideon didn't want them. 4 years of Gideon believing the woman he loved just abandoned him. all because of one person's interference. Now I have to ask you, drop a comment right now. What would you do if you found out someone sabotaged your relationship like this? Would you ever be able to forgive them? And if you're feeling as emotionally invested as I am right now, do me a favor, smash that like button. It really helps the channel and lets me know you want more stories like this one. All right, let's get back to it, because Gideon is about to confront his mother. And things are about to get real. Return to present-day storyline. The next morning, Gideon woke from fitful sleep. He had gotten home late after leaving Nyla's apartment and spent hours pondering how to break the news to Genevieve and confront his mother. He knew he had to do both without delay. He found Genevieve already blowing up his phone with missed calls and texts. Apparently she'd seen some gossip article. Sure enough, when Gideon checked, a tabloid site had a photo taken yesterday of him leaving Nyla's apartment building. The headline read, "Billionaire heir visits mystery woman's home. Trouble in paradise for him and fiancée." Gideon groaned. This was exactly the kind of unwanted attention he dreaded. The article speculated if he was cheating on Genevieve, since no one knew yet that the mystery woman was an ex, or that the child existed. He immediately called Genevieve. She answered on the first ring, her voice tense. "Gideon, what on earth is going on? Who is this woman in the photo?" "Good morning to you too," he said gently, trying to stay calm. "General, I was just about to call you. We need to talk. Can I come over?" Genevieve huffed. "Yes, please do. I think I deserve an explanation. The media are calling me for comments. I've said nothing, but I'm so embarrassed I didn't even know you were seeing someone behind my back." "I'll explain everything in person," Gideon said firmly. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hurried to Genevieve's upscale condo. Each minute of the drive, his anxiety built. This conversation would be painful, but he had to be truthful. Upon arriving, he found Genevieve pacing her living room, the offending tabloid open on her laptop. She was still in her silk robe, her eyes red from anger or tears or both. "Is it true?" she demanded as soon as he entered. "Are you cheating on me with some woman who has a kid?" "No, I haven't cheated," Gideon said, raising his palms. "But it's complicated. That woman is Nyla. The one we met in the elevator. We used to date years ago. And yes, the child is my son." Genevieve's jaw dropped. She stared at him in disbelief. "Your son?" she shouted. "You have a child with her and never told me." "I didn't know, Genevieve," Gideon said quickly. "I only just found out yesterday. I swear to you, I was unaware she even had a child, let alone that I was the father." Genevieve's hand flew to her mouth. She sank onto the couch. "Oh my God, this is unbelievable." Gideon moved closer, but kept some distance, sensing she might not want to be touched. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I never intended for any of this to happen. Nyla and I broke up a long time ago, and I had no clue she was pregnant when she left. She never told me. I found out the truth only after going to see her yesterday." Genevieve looked up at him, eyes shining with tears now. "All this time you pined for her, didn't you?" she whispered. "I always sensed a part of you was unreachable. It was her." Gideon felt a stab of guilt. "Genevieve, I did my best to be a good partner to you. I cared about you deeply, and still do. But you're right. Losing Nyla hurt me more than I let on. I didn't realize how much I'd been holding back until I saw her again." Genevieve closed her eyes, a tear rolling down. "So where does that leave us?" "Our wedding is in a month. Our families, the invitations. You're just going to throw it all away for someone who left you and a kid you just met?" Gideon knelt in front of her, speaking earnestly. "I know this is awful. I never wanted to hurt you. But think about it. If we got married with my heart in this state, it wouldn't be fair to you. And I have a child now. A little boy who needs his father. I can't turn my back on him, or on the feelings I clearly still have for Nyla." Her expression hardened slightly. "So you choose them over me?" "It's not about choosing like that," he began. "It is," Genevieve snapped, standing abruptly, forcing him to step back. "Let's be real, Gideon. If she hadn't shown up, we would have married, and I'd be none the wiser, content with you. But now she's here, and suddenly I'm cast aside." Her voice rose with hurt and anger. "I was ready to spend my life with you. I loved you, and I thought we'd start our own family. But you apparently never truly loved me back in the same way. She still owns your heart." Gideon's shoulders slumped. "I did love you, General, in my own way. But yes, I realize now it wasn't enough. You deserve more than half measures." Genevieve wiped her tears and straightened her spine. There was pride in her eyes now. "You're right, I do." She drew a shaky breath. "I won't be second choice. So, we're done here." He felt a wave of sorrow, even though he was ready to break it off. Seeing her pain cut him deeply. "I truly am sorry. You've been nothing but good to me. I hope someday you can forgive me." She held up a hand. "Just go, Gideon. Handle your mess. I'll deal with cancelling everything." Her tone was cold now, a defense mechanism over her heartbreak. He nodded, accepting her anger. "If there's any way I can make this less painful—" "Leave," she interrupted, voice cracking. "That's all you can do." Gideon hesitated, then quietly left her apartment. As the door closed behind him, he exhaled shakily. It was done. His engagement was over. Guilt gnawed at him, but also relief that he wasn't living a lie any longer. Now he had another confrontation ahead, with his mother. If the tabloid got wind, his parents likely already knew something was afoot. He decided to head straight to the Sinclair family estate that afternoon. Sure enough, when Gideon arrived at his parents' mansion outside the city, Margaret and Charles were waiting in the study, having seen the same news. Charles looked concerned, while Margaret was unusually quiet, sipping tea. "Son," Charles said, standing, "we heard some surprising news. This article—" He gestured to a printout on the coffee table. Gideon remained standing, facing his parents. "It's true. I have a 3-year-old son, and I've called off my engagement with Genevieve." He figured ripping the bandage off quickly was best. Charles looked stunned, but then a slow smile spread beneath his grey mustache. "A grandson? Well, that's unexpected, but wonderful." He stepped forward as if to hug Gideon in congratulations. Margaret set her teacup down with a rattle. "Wonderful. Charles, please. Let's ascertain the facts." She eyed Gideon sharply. "Is this child truly yours, Gideon? And who is the mother? The press hasn't named her." Gideon met his mother's gaze with cold firmness. "You know exactly who the mother is, Mother." He rarely used that formal mother, unless he was upset. "It's Nyla Waters. And yes, Micah is my son. I've done the math, and everything fits. I trust Nyla implicitly on this, but if you insist, we will get a paternity test to silence any skeptics." Margaret paled slightly. "Nyla, I see." She exchanged a brief look with Charles, who frowned in confusion. "Margaret, isn't Nyla the girl from years ago?" Charles asked. "The one who left suddenly? You told me she broke Gideon's heart out of the blue." "Yes," Gideon answered before his mother could. "That's the one. The woman I was devastated over, who apparently left out of nowhere. Only it turns out it wasn't out of nowhere, was it, Mother?" His voice was steely. Margaret stood slowly, bracing herself on the arm of her chair. "Gideon, I know you're upset, but don't take that tone with me. We haven't even fully discussed—" "Upset doesn't begin to cover it," Gideon interrupted, anger rising as he thought of all the lost years. "I spoke at length with Nyla yesterday. She told me everything. How you lied to her, how you tried to pay her off to leave me, and how you threatened her livelihood." Charles looked at his wife in shock. "Margaret, is this true? You interfered with their relationship?" Margaret flushed, her composure slipping. I did what I thought was best for our son. Yes, I spoke to her. That girl was all wrong for him, Charles. You knew it too. I may have exaggerated some things to persuade her." "Exaggerated? You told her I was going to marry Genevieve back then, that I considered her a fling." Gideon's voice was raised now, echoing in the study. "You made her believe she was saving me from scandal. Meanwhile, you let me believe she abandoned me without cause." Margaret stiffened defensively. I was trying to prevent you from ruining your future. And it worked, didn't it? You became CEO without distractions. You were set to marry into a good family. Stop, Gideon said, holding up his hand. Disgust and disappointment warred within him. Just stop. You think I consider being without Nyla and my child distraction-free success? I consider it an unbearable loss, one you orchestrated. Did you never once consider my happiness? Charles interjected, voice stern. Margaret, I can't believe you'd go so far. We promised each other we wouldn't meddle like this. Our son's happiness should have been the priority. Margaret's eyes glistened. Perhaps she hadn't expected this backlash. I did what I thought was right, she repeated, but uncertainty laced her tone now. All I wanted was for him to have a stable life, with someone who fit your standards, not mine, Gideon finished bitterly. He paced away to calm himself, then turned back. Well, here are the facts. I have a son, Micah. I love him dearly already, and I plan to be in his life fully. And I still love Nyla. I intend to do everything I can to repair the damage and be a family with them, if they'll have me. Charles let out a breath of something like relief. Son, if that's what you want, you have my blessing. A grandson. We'd love to meet him, of course, when the time is right. He stepped forward and put a hand on Gideon's shoulder. I'm proud of you for standing up for your family. Gideon smiled gratefully at his father. Then both men looked at Margaret. She was silent, trembling slightly, her eyes downcast. It was clear her machinations had backfired spectacularly. Now she risked losing her son's trust and the chance to know her grandson. After a long pause, Margaret spoke, her voice quieter, stripped of its usual authority. What do you want me to say, Gideon? That I'm sorry? I am. I see now that I was wrong. She swallowed hard, clasping her hands. It seems I've made a terrible mistake. I cost you years of happiness and cost myself a relationship with my grandchild. Tears formed in her eyes, genuine remorse shining through. Please, I do want to meet Micah. I want to make this right, if possible. Gideon regarded his mother. This was perhaps the first time in his adult life he'd seen her so vulnerable and contrite. It softened him slightly, though the hurt ran deep. Making it right won't happen overnight, he said. It'll take time and earn trust. I need to know you won't ever meddle or treat Nyla with anything other than respect. Margaret nodded rapidly. Of course. I will respect her. I'll apologize to her too. I hope it's not too late for me to be forgiven. That's up to Nyla, Gideon replied. And to me, frankly. But for now, I won't shut you out as long as you truly support us going forward. Charles patted Margaret's arm as she dabbed her eyes. We'll support you, son. Family is family. Little Micah is a Sinclair and also a Waters. We must welcome them both. Margaret managed a weak smile at her husband, then at Gideon. Thank you. And yes, anything you need, we'll help. Does the child need a trust fund? Schooling? Oh, I've missed 3 years. She trailed off, emotion choking her. Gideon sighed, the tension easing fractionally. We can discuss all that later. First, I need to make sure Nyla is all right with everything. The media exposure has her worried, I'm sure. After briefing his parents a bit more and extracting promises of good behavior, Gideon left. As he drove back into the city, he let out a long breath. In 24 hours, his life had upturned completely. Broken engagement, discovered son, truth about past revealed. It was a whirlwind, but oddly he felt more at peace than he had in years. The truth was out, and he was free to follow his heart. He called Nyla to update her. She answered softly, Hi, Gideon. Hi, are you doing okay? Did you see the article? He asked gently. She sighed. I did. It worried me, but I'm more concerned about you. It must have been rough dealing with Genevieve. It was, he admitted. I spoke to her this morning. We ended things. She's hurt, but it was the right decision. And I talked to my parents too. They know about Micah. Nyla was silent a moment. Then how did they take it? My father's thrilled to be a grandpa. Gideon said with a small chuckle. My mother, she's remorseful. I confronted her about what she did. She wants a chance to apologize to you and meet Micah someday, but only when you're ready. Nyla absorbed that. It was a lot to take in. The formidable Margaret Sinclair brought low. I'll need time to process that, she said. But I appreciate that she acknowledged the truth finally. Me too. Gideon smiled, picturing Nyla's face. Listen, I was thinking, would you and Micah like to come stay at my place for a while? Just to get out of the city craziness. I have a beach house in the Hamptons we could retreat to for a bit, get some privacy from all this media fuss until it dies down. Nyla hesitated. The idea of a peaceful escape with Gideon and their son was tempting. I do have some work commitments, but maybe I can take a few days off. I am worried about paparazzi around here now. Better to avoid that. I can have security stationed at your place too, to deter any intrusion, Gideon offered. Security detail, that's new for me, Nyla said wryly. I'm sorry you even have to think about it, but I promise I'll make sure you both are safe and comfortable. His voice was earnest. We have a lot to talk about and figure out. Doing that in a tranquil place might help. She found herself smiling softly. All right. A little trip to the beach sounds nice. Micah's never been to the ocean. Then it's settled. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning. Okay. Gideon. Thank you, Nyla said quietly. For everything you're doing. It means more than I can say. No, thank you, he replied, voice full of feeling, for giving me back my family. 2 days later, present day, Gideon, Nyla, and Micah were strolling along a secluded Hamptons beach as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. Micah squealed with delight every time a gentle wave washed over his tiny feet. Gideon held one of his hands, and Nyla held the other, swinging him playfully between them over the foam. Their laughter mingled with the soft roar of the ocean, a sound of a family coming together at last. For the first time in years, Gideon felt a profound contentment. He glanced at Nyla. She was glowing in the sunset light, her curls wild in the sea breeze, a genuine smile on her face as she watched Micah. Over the past days at the beach house, they'd talked for hours, sharing all the experiences they'd missed in each other's lives and laying bare their feelings. There were tears and apologies. Gideon apologized for not finding her sooner and for moving on with someone else. Nyla apologized for not trusting him with the truth. They forgave each other wholeheartedly, both understanding that external forces had driven them apart. Piece by piece, they were rebuilding the trust that had been broken. Genevieve had sent a brief email saying she would have her things removed from Gideon's penthouse and that she didn't want further contact. It stung, but Gideon knew it was for the best. He wished her healing and happiness silently. Margaret had called as well, expressing again how sorry she was. Nyla spoke to her over the phone one morning, a polite but emotional conversation where Margaret tearfully asked for forgiveness. Nyla, with grace, said she'd try to forgive in time and agreed to let her meet Micah soon under supervised conditions. It was a start of mending fences. Little Micah was too young to grasp the complexity of it all, but he was perceptive enough to see his mummy and daddy together and happy. He thrived under their joint attention these few days, giggling through Sandcastle Building with Gideon, cuddling in Nyla's lap during evening bonfires, and proudly showing off seashells he collected to both of them. As they reached a jetty of rocks, Micah yawned, the day's excitement wearing him out. Nyla picked him up, and he rested his head on her shoulder contentedly. I think someone's ready for bed, she said softly. They walked back to the beautiful beach house, a modern bungalow that Gideon owned, which overlooked the dunes and sea. Inside, Nyla took Micah to wash up and change into pajamas, while Gideon tidied up the kitchen from dinner. It felt wonderfully domestic, like they'd been doing this for ages. Soon, Micah was tucked into bed in the guest room. Gideon sat at the bedside with Nyla as they read him a bedtime story together, alternating paragraphs and doing silly voices that made him giggle. When his eyes finally fluttered closed, Nyla gently kissed his forehead, and Gideon did the same, marveling that he finally could. They left the door ajar and tiptoed out. In the living room, the fireplace crackled gently. The spring evening had a slight chill, Gideon poured 2 cups of chamomile tea and handed one to Nyla on the sofa. She took a sip and sighed with pleasure. "This feels surreal," she murmured. "In a good way. I keep pinching myself that we're really here together, after everything." Gideon set down his cup and put an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "It's real," he said, kissing her temple, "and I am grateful for every second of it." They cuddled in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the distant waves. Finally, Gideon spoke quietly. "Nyla, I know we're just starting to put things back together, but I want you to know my intentions." He turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "I love you. I never stopped loving you. And now that I have you and Micah back, I don't ever want to let you go." Her eyes shone as she gazed at him. "I love you too, Gideon, so much. I thought I was doing the right thing leaving, but not a day went by that I didn't think of you. Having you with us now, it's a blessing I didn't dare dream of." He gently stroked her cheek. "I'm going to do everything I can to make up for lost time. You and Micah are my family now. I want to protect you, cherish you, and never take you for granted again." Nyla leaned in, and their lips met in a slow, tender kiss. It was their first true kiss since reuniting, beyond the quick hug at the door days ago. This kiss conveyed all the yearning of years apart and the promise of a future together. Gideon cupped the back of her head, deepening it slightly, and Nyla responded, her hand resting on his chest where she could feel his heart racing. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing a bit unsteadily, foreheads resting together. "Wow," Nyla whispered with a smile. "Definitely not a dream." Gideon chuckled softly, brushing his thumb over her swollen lips. "Most definitely real, and if it is a dream, I never want to wake up." They laughed quietly and settled back into each other's arms, watching the fire. Nyla spoke up after a moment, voice thoughtful. "You know, through all of this, I've learned something important." "What's that?" Gideon inquired, trailing his fingers through her curls absent-mindedly. "I learned the value of communication and honesty. If we had been open with each other back then, if I had just confronted you or you had pried the truth from your mother, so much pain could have been avoided." She sighed. "I don't want any more secrets between us, ever." Gideon nodded, pulling her closer. "Agreed. Total honesty, even when it's hard. That's the only way to build a strong foundation." I also learned how dangerous pride can be. Both our prides were used against us, yours in not wanting to be a burden, mine in believing you left by choice and not swallowing it to dig deeper. I promise I'll always fight for us now and never let pride or outside voices pull us apart. Nyla kissed his cheek softly. "I promise that too. And another thing, I think our story proves that true love can overcome a lot. Time, distance, lies. In the end, the truth came out, and our love was still there. It makes me believe that if something's meant to be, it'll find a way." He smiled. "Absolutely. We'll teach that to Micah as he grows up. Actually, there are a lot of lessons I want him to learn from this. The importance of family, forgiveness, and acceptance." Nyla added, "Yes, like how your mother came around. People can change and deserve a chance to make amends." I was so angry at her, but hearing her apologize, I could sense her regret was genuine. It reminded me that holding on to anger only hurts oneself. Forgiveness can set you free. "Wise words," Gideon murmured, tilting her face up to steal another gentle kiss. "We've both grown from this ordeal, and I think it's given us an even deeper appreciation for what we have now." She smiled brightly. "I appreciate every little thing, even just having tea with you or watching you and Micah play hungry, hungry hippos on the floor." She giggled at that memory from the afternoon. Gideon laughed. "He cheated, by the way. Distracted me with that fake sneeze so he could hit the lever faster. He's cunning like his dad," Nyla joked. Then her expression turned tender. "Gideon, seeing you with our son, it fills my heart. He adores you already. And I know you'll be an amazing father." He looked humbled. "I'm new to it, but I'll try my best. I want to be the kind of father who's always there. You've done such an amazing job with him, Nyla. He's kind and bright, just like his mom." She blushed with happiness. Thank you. That means a lot. They sat for a while longer, simply enjoying the peace. The future was not without challenges. They would return to the city and face extended family, press, and adjusting to life together. But they were ready to tackle it hand in hand. As the fire died down, Gideon reached behind a cushion and pulled something out, turning to Nyla with a serious yet hopeful look. It was the small velvet ring box he had bought 4 years ago, intending to propose to her then. He had kept it all this time, locked away after she left, a symbol of what could have been. Nyla's eyes widened as he opened it to reveal a simple yet elegant diamond ring. Gideon, she breathed. He gently took her left hand. This was meant for you back then. It's always been for you. I was going to wait longer, but we've lost enough time. I want to start our forever as soon as possible. He slid off the couch to one knee, still holding her hand. Nyla Waters, will you marry me? Will you stay by my side and let me love you and our son for the rest of our lives? Tears filled Nyla's eyes, but this time they were joyous. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, of course I will. Gideon beamed and slipped the ring onto her finger, where it fit perfectly. Nyla admired it briefly, laughing through her tears. It's beautiful. I can't believe you kept it all this time. I never stopped hoping, I guess, he said softly. Nyla cupped his face and kissed him deeply, sealing their promise. When they broke apart, she joked, "Good thing we didn't use any generic names for each other, like Babe or something. That wouldn't suit us." She winked, recalling a light-hearted conversation about unique names. Gideon chuckled, pulling her up as he stood. "No, it wouldn't. You, Nyla, are one of a kind." She grinned. "And you, Gideon, are the only one I'll ever call mine." Hand in hand, they headed towards the bedroom, ready to end the night in each other's arms. They checked on Micah once more. He was fast asleep, hugging the little stuffed whale his daddy bought him at a beach shop. As they watched their child sleep, Gideon wrapped an arm around Nyla's waist and murmured, "We're lucky, you know." She leaned into him. "I do know." They left the door slightly ajar and went to their own room. The love between them was rekindled, stronger than ever, after being tested by hardship. In the gentle darkness, they shared tender kisses and whispered words of love, finally, allowing themselves the intimacy and closeness they'd been denied for so long. Their movements were slow and affectionate, each touch a reassurance. "I am here. I love you. We have a second chance." They kept their passion respectful and within the bounds of tenderness, mindful that this story might be shared with a wide audience. Later, as Nyla lay with her head on Gideon's chest, listening to his heartbeat, she felt a profound peace. He stroked her arm lazily, and they gazed at the stars visible through the skylight. "Are you happy?" Gideon asked softly, though he was pretty sure of the answer from the content smile on her face. "Beyond happy," she replied. "We might have taken a long, winding road, but we got here, and that's what matters." He kissed the top of her head. "I'll spend every day trying to keep you this happy." "You already do, just by being you," she said. They fell quiet, on the brink of sleep, wrapped in each other. The future beckoned brightly. A wedding to plan, perhaps a small one on this very beach, they mused, raising Micah together, maybe even giving him a sibling someday. There would be laughter and undoubtedly some tears, but they would face it all side by side. In the end, Gideon and Nyla's story was one of love lost and found, of forgiveness and growth. They had taught each other and would teach their son that honesty, trust and compassion are the pillars of a lasting relationship. They learned that true love is patient and kind, capable of weathering storms and coming out stronger. And most importantly, they discovered that family is built on love, not blood or wealth or approval from society. As they drifted off to sleep, heart to heart, both knew that their journey, however tumultuous, had led them to this perfect moment of peace. And they were grateful. And there it is. After 4 long years, secrets, heartbreak, and one chance elevator encounter, Gideon and Nyla finally got their happy ending. Little Micah has his daddy. Gideon has his family. And Nyla, she finally knows she was always the one. You know, stories like this remind us that true love doesn't just disappear. Sometimes it's just waiting for the right moment to find its way back. Now, I want to hear from you. What was your favorite part of this story? Was it the elevator moment? The first time Gideon held Micah? Or maybe when he finally put Margaret in her place? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And hey, if this story made you smile, made you tear up, or had you yelling at your screen, please take a second to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves a good love story. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. You're the reason I get to do this. Until next time, take care of your heart, and I'll see you in the next one.